Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Green Flag. I'm your host, Lukas Wacker. With me, as always, we have Kyle Cushman. And in today's episode, we are previewing the French Grand Prix for Formula One. Going to be an interesting one, to say the least. Paul Ricard has had varying degrees of success on the lower scale side of things in its previous history. After its hiatus last season to the COVID-19 pandemic, it has returned to the F1 calendar once again this season. Practices have already been underway and done and dusted for FP1 and FP2. So we have a bit of an understanding coming into today in terms of who has some pace and who doesn't have some pace. So looking forward to breaking this one down a little bit. We've got our fantasy picks coming up very shortly, as well as we have one big driver news to get into. But how are you doing today, Kyle? We'll just start off with that.
Yeah, I'm doing good. Of course, French Grand Prix isn't the most exciting one coming into this weekend, but I think when you look at the storylines overall, it's actually a much more interesting Grand Prix than it has been the previous two times that we've been to Paul Ricard in 2018 and 2019, just because the last two races has been very much Red Bull dominated. Coming back to a regular Grand Prix circuit, not a street circuit, that's where the Mercedes is supposed to be better and supposed to actually have kind of a step up if you look at the season as a whole on the Red Bulls. So whether Mercedes can take that step back up, whether Valtteri Bottas can get in the conversation, all this kind of different stuff, whether Sergio Perez can take the form that he's had in recent kind of weeks and apply that to another Grand Prix circuit as well. I think there's a lot of interesting storylines to watch, even though the on-track product may not be great.
Fair enough on that front. But we'll start off with the big news on the driver market.
Yeah.
And it's no big switch or anything, but it's a guy that is staying put. And we did our preseason driver moves for Formula One, and we had this guy on the move, moving elsewhere from Alpine, but he is in fact staying in Alpine, as Esteban Ocon has signed a 3-year contract extension with Alpine F1 team. He's really the first driver to figure out their 2022 plans that could have potentially been on the move. So a real big congratulations to Esteban Ocon to really try and find a home for himself in Formula One. It's been really all over the place for him in his very young F1 journey. Started off at Manor, was a Mercedes young driver, still is a Mercedes youth driver to an extent, and did some testing stuff for them when he was exiled out of Racing Point or then Force India. So it's been all over the place for Esteban Ocon, then moved to Renault, which has now become Alpine. So he's been through a lot of different driver names or team names, but he has finally found his home with Alpine, and that's great to see a French team supporting their French drivers. So your thoughts on the deal here, Kyle? Really nice to see him get a really long extension here. 3 years in Formula One is really, really great for a driver just to get that security, that job security for a team. So your thoughts on the move for Ocon to stay put?
Yeah, coming into this year, it seemed like a lot of people were down on Esteban Ocon, and a lot of people were predicting that he would leave the team, as did we, and that he would kind of be replaced by Pierre Gasly. But at least for myself, I really expected him to be a lot stronger than people expected. And we've seen that so far this season. He's currently ahead of Fernando Alonso in the standings. He's basically outfinished him most of the weekends as well. So I think it's absolutely deserving extension. You look back to his Force India Racing Point days when he was up against Sergio Perez. And he kind of went toe-to-toe for a lot of those races with Perez, had a couple of clashes as well with Sergio Perez. And this was as a very young driver coming up through the system, and people thought very highly of him. He loses that seat to Lance Stroll, isn't able to find another ride, loses a season. And people kind of forgot his talents. He comes back with Renault last season and goes up against Daniel Ricciardo, who has years under his belt at Renault, and kind of starts slowly find some pace over the season and ends pretty strongly, basically going toe to toe with Daniel Ricciardo throughout much of that kind of last stint of the season. And people kind of didn't recognize that as much as they should. And this season, I think Ocon has taken that confidence with Alpine, taken the confidence with the car against a very tough opponent or teammate in Fernando Alonso, and has succeeded. So absolutely deserving of the extension. French driver with a French team, no reason to switch it up for Alpine. I think you look elsewhere, and I'm a little bit surprised that Ocon is the first one to re-sign when you look at Alpine maybe wanting to take a step back, see how things play out, kind of have that Ocon card if you want to, but also look and see if maybe a Valtteri Bottas becomes available, if like a George Russell becomes available, if Pierre Gasly becomes available. There's a lot of different routes that they could have potentially looked to, depending on how the driver market played out and decisions other teams made. But I think they've made an excellent bet in Esteban Ocon here. Still a young driver, showing his consistency as well this season, being able to get the most out of that car going up against a tough teammate in Fernando Alonso. So I'm absolutely a big fan of the move. 3 years is maybe a bit more than I expected. I expected maybe a 2-year extension for him, but a lot of faith being placed in Esteban Ocon here with Alpine.
Yeah, he's very promising, right? Like he's got a lot of potential with him. And, I don't think there was really a bad move that Alpine could have really made. They're in a very good position driver-wise. You got Fernando Alonso for one more season, and then he's probably done in Formula One beyond that.
Yes.
We'll see on that front, but he's getting up there in age. But for Esteban Ocon, they have a young guy they can build around, and then they can kind of look elsewhere for 2023 and see who could be a good partner to fill that spot with him. There's a lot of different names that you could throw into that pile, depending on the names you just mentioned: George Russell, Valtteri Bottas, and Pierre Gasly, to name a few, that are in an interesting situation when it comes to their job for 2022. They're all up in contract seasons, and they have options to potentially move to go swap for swap or vice versa, or whatever the case may be. There's a lot of different things to look at for Alpine, but when you look at what it's available, I don't think there was one, there's a couple of guys you probably would, look at and be like, yeah, I'd want George Russell, I'd want Pierre Gasly, but Esteban Ocon is no slouch in himself. So having him there, I don't think they made a wrong decision here whatsoever. He's a good fit for that team, a Frenchman with a French team. Like I said, you can't have better marketing than that for a team like this that's really trying to make their mark with this new team and let that branding try and get that exposure for that. Having a French person drive their car, that's a phenomenal kind of filler spot for that team, and we'll see where they go with the future of this team once Fernando Alonso eventually does move on from Formula One. But really interesting to see, like you said, that this is the first domino to really fall in the silly season front for Formula One. I wouldn't have expected Esteban Ocon to do it maybe around this time, but if it's going to be any better place than the French Grand Prix, I couldn't think of it for Esteban Ocon coming to his home grace. I think it's a perfect storm for him to have a really good weekend here for his French Grand Prix, and Alpine is showing their pace so far through the practice sessions. But do you have anything else you want to add on Esteban Ocon before we can kind of move into fantasy? Because it's been a quiet news front and that since the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, since that Grand Prix took place, and Esteban Ocon is really the only news that we've had since then.
Just quickly, I want to rectify something I said earlier. Fernando Alonso did pass him by 1 point after the chaos of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. So I just wanted to correct that. Ocon went out early. DNF finished last. Yeah. Fernando Alonso took advantage of some strategy. The chaos that was ended up with 8 points. So 13-12 now, very, very close. But Ocon over the entire season has finished higher than Alonso more occasions than he is not. So I just wanted to fix that there while I had the opportunity. But I do think one of the more interesting kind of secondary pieces to this is a lot of people kind of figured that Pierre Gasly would leave AlphaTauri and go to Alpine this season. Ocon would kind of lose out on that seat with Fernando Alonso having that extra year. It's still possible Alonso could decide to retire after the season. I doubt that's the case with a 2-year contract. I feel like he's committed, and the way that things have been going more recently, that he's committed to racing out that second season. So for Pierre Gasly, it's kind of tough the way that things are playing out right now. He doesn't have a ton of options. It feels like it's going to be AlphaTauri or kind of like Williams are kind of the two options, and Williams going into next season should improve just given they're getting more of that Mercedes help and everything like that. So they're a promising team into the future, but that's still not a sexy team to kind of switch over to. So I'm interested to see how things play out for Pierre Gasly now going into the future. AlphaTauri, I feel like he's likely to stay there. I feel like the only way he doesn't is if one of the Red Bull juniors went F2 and they don't have the option to return to that series into next season, because of course, if the Formula 2 champion is not eligible to return, they have to go elsewhere, which is something we saw with Nick de Vries a few years back. He didn't get that F1 seat, goes over to Formula E, this kind of stuff. So I feel like the only way that Gasly probably doesn't have the option to return to AlphaTauri is if a Yuri Vips or a Liam Lawson win F2, which right now is probably not the favorite to how things will go. Vips did have a great weekend at Baku, so we'll see how things go. But Gasly, I think, is going to be that key kind of name that everyone is really high on right now, but doesn't have a lot of those options to also fall back into if he doesn't have the option to return to AlphaTauri, or even if he wanted to get an upgrade on AlphaTauri. There isn't really that place for him to go right now.
No, there's no place to move up. And I mean, he had that opportunity when he moved up with Red Bull, and it didn't quite work out for him, unfortunately. But he is a really, really solid talent. And, you know, his future is elsewhere for sure, because it's good for him to try and think that way. I really hope he stays at AlphaTauri for one more season, and then he potentially moves to Alpine to take that Fernando Alonso vacancy. I think it'd be great for Alpine to have two French drivers, despite their relationship not being the greatest. But I think there is the potential for that to work itself out for, you know, marketing reasons and everything like that. And for Gasly just to get that change of scenery that he probably really needs at the end of it. Like he's found his home with AlphaTauri. Don't get me wrong. I think his results there have been spectacular in that team, Toro Rosso and now AlphaTauri. But if he wants to go to that next level, he's going to have to move outside of the Red Bull sister team here and move to an actual team that it builds in-house and everything like that, and isn't relying on somebody else. That's much like what Williams is to Mercedes, the junior team with George Russell kind of sitting in there. I would hate for him to go down to Williams for next season on a kind of a one-year thing, because he's much better than that in my opinion. But every driver in F1 is talented. It's just whether or not they're finding the ride is available for that given season. So that it's definitely the domino effect here with Esteban Ocon signing that. Now, what does Pierre Gasly do for 2022? That's the one that really stands out, because sure, Valtteri Bottas, if he leaves Mercedes, that could have been a viable option. But I think you're looking at Pierre Gasly, excuse me, you're looking at Pierre Gasly more so than Valtteri Bottas if you're someone like Alpine. So interesting stuff as per usual with F1. The driver market is absolutely fascinating. So I can't wait to see what happens over the summer months, as it's going to pick up relatively quickly as drivers like to find their homes by the end of the summer break after the Belgian or the Italian Grand Prix, whichever one it is this season. But it's the start of 3 consecutive weeks here, Kyle, for Formula One. Very rare with the calendar. France for the French Grand Prix, and then we go to Austria for a doubleheader. Of course, this was meant to be Turkey, but then it got canceled. Yes. So that was, it's been all over the place with the scheduling sort of thing. But France, then we go to Austria, then the Styrian Grand Prix after that. So back-to-back in Austria. Looking forward to this 3-week massive stint here for Formula One to really get their season kind of kicked off. It's just momentum and momentum after that crazy Azerbaijan Grand Prix. The championship is basically null and void after that one, after the Hamilton and Verstappen non-point scoring finishes. So everything is up for grabs here at the Circuit of Paul Ricard. So I think let's go into the fantasy picks here, Kyle. We don't have much else to talk about for the previewing for this weekend. I'm finally making some changes. I know. Wow. I usually, swap them out, Leclerc in, Perez out, depending on the race weekend, yada, yada, yada. I've been pretty, bland, if you want to call it that,
hey, it's working for you
for a couple of weeks. But I have done very, very well with fantasy. My value is up 4.2 million since the start of the season with my team. So it's been very, very good. I'm really happy with where I'm at with my picks and everything for each race weekend. Of course, you can, hindsight is 2020 and want to make a couple of adjustments, but overall, I'm feeling pleased with my decision. But how are you feeling? Just a general outlook of your season thus far. How are you feeling coming into the French Grand Prix?
Well, the beginning of my season, I didn't feel that great about, to be completely honest. When you look at kind of your start to the season, you kind of came out of the gates hot, and you also got that bonus in your budget, which I think has really allowed you to kind of do some things that I haven't had the opportunity to do. I think it was just last weekend that I was able to get Perez in the lineup there. So some other things that I wish I'd done early on in the season, but I think a big turning point for me was using that mega driver, getting the triple points for Verstappen at Monaco, not having to worry about where I'm going to play that and how that works into the schedule. Last weekend would have loved, or what is it, 2 weekends ago now, whatever it is. I don't know. Time is irrelevant at this point. That Max Verstappen win would have been great, but turbo driver on Sergio Perez worked out pretty well there as well. So a little bit of a silver lining to that one. So after a bit of a start where I was like, darn, if I could have done this, I was feeling a bit uneasy. Now I'm starting to gain some more confidence in this team. The budget's still only at 102.9 currently with some of the changes that I've made. But I'm still feeling pretty confident in the lineup that I've got right here.
Alrighty. Well, we'll see if who comes out on the victory end of things here.
Yeah.
You're of course up with the mega driver usage overall on points, so it's hard to really kind of get an estimate on that until I use mine, and we can kind of go after that. But
that's the scary part.
Yeah, I'm not too far behind after you've used that mega usage, and I have a place in mind where I think I'm going to use it. But
yeah, it's basically 100-point difference.
Yeah, so it'll probably come down to that with the Verstappen thing. I'm looking later on into the European stint here for potential usage on him, but looking forward to this one, the changes and the switcheroos and whatnot, what we've got going on. But the guys that we still have in our lineups from the previous weekend, I feel like we're basically on repeat with these, but we'll just go over it once again.
It's for good reason. Yeah.
Max Verstappen, self-explanatory why he's still in our lineups. We're not going to be taking him out for the rest of the season. He's just unbelievably good right now. Championship leader, of course, after not scoring any points in Azerbaijan, but then Lewis Hamilton didn't either. So the championship is basically square at what it was before the Baku street circuit. So looking forward to seeing what Verstappen can do here. Hasn't finished on the podium, I believe, here in France, has he? Or if he has,
let me double check. I believe he did the first year that they did.
Was it 2018 when he did it?
I believe he did in 2018.
Then he finished fourth last time out in 2019. So Red Bull has been decent here in their kind of short stint here for the French Grand Prix. But, when they've been here previously, Verstappen said that they weren't quite comfortable with the car on this layout, but they have a much stronger piece this time around. So that gives them a bit more confidence that they can fight for a potential race win this weekend. And the practice times are definitely showing that. Verstappen leading FP2, but the Mercedes cars are on a bounce back after two really tough weekends for them in Baku, and then of course Monaco with finishes. So they're looking to right the ship on a normal racetrack, as we've seen is their strength so far this season. So what do you make of Verstappen this weekend here, Kyle? Probably definitely one of the race favorites for sure. That's self-explanatory, but what are your expectations from him this weekend?
Yeah, it's top two finish is the expectation, whether that's winning the race or finishing second to whatever Mercedes it is, because right now it's kind of looked like Bottas maybe has the advantage this weekend. Mm-hmm. You can look to the Mercedes because it's a Grand Prix circuit. It's not a street circuit. It favors the Mercedes more from what we've seen so far this season. It just doesn't make sense to use any of your 3 free changes to take Verstappen out and put in a more expensive driver that is arguably even riskier. So for Verstappen, his price is constantly going up, so helping at your budget in that regard. And it just doesn't make sense to take him out of the lineup. Just because he is arguably the favorite now going into these weekends over Hamilton after these last couple of Grand Prix. I would still hear an argument going into a weekend such as this one at a French Grand Prix, where it has been Mercedes dominated, as basically everywhere has been, but is also on the Grand Prix circuit versus the street circuit, which favors the Mercedes as well. So Verstappen had the edge in FP2 there, just slight 8 thousandths or something like that over Bottas's time. So definitely not much between it if you're looking at practice times, but just no reason to take him out of the lineup at this point. He's got a podium, finished second after qualifying fourth in both Grand Prix at Paul Ricard, but qualified fourth in 2018, first time they'd been there, finished second, qualified fourth, finished fourth in 2019. He's a shoo-in for a podium position. I think it's just a matter of whether it's first or second.
I'm in agreement with that, but I believe your next guy for your pick is actually much higher than anybody else that I have in my lineup in terms of their price this weekend. So
interesting.
Who's your secondary price guy coming into this weekend that you kept?
Second most expensive, just keeping it to the driver lineup right now, not including constructor. We'll do that last. I am sticking with Sergio Perez this weekend. I like the form that he's been in recently, taking that momentum from the two street circuits coming off of the win. Paul Ricard hasn't been great for him, qualifying 14th and 13th, finishing 12th in DNF. So it hasn't been great in that regard, finished 12th in 2019. But remember, that was before the pink Mercedes when they were arguably or should have been the third constructor that last season. For Sergio Perez, FP1, he was close to Verstappen. FP2, I didn't see what happened there, but he was a decent bit off. For Perez, just simply put, second best car or first best car, depending on your perspective. Very solid driver. I've got him fairly cheap in the lineup, and he's turbo eligible. So even if the qualifying effort isn't there, I still believe in the pace of him and the car and the strategy of the team enough to gain positions on race day. So Sergio Perez is in my lineup, and he is my turbo driver as well.
Alrighty. For me, I ended up taking Sergio Perez out of my lineup. I made a switch that I'll get to a little bit later on, but for my second highest price guy, it is actually Carlos Sainz.
Okay,
which is interesting. Yeah, I've done a bit of a switcheroo here for the first time in a while, but
I feel like you might be galaxy branding a little bit, but I'm interested to see where you go here.
2019, he finished sixth here, so very good with the McLaren, and that was before they hit their 2020 kind of stride. So really solid result for him there last time. His teammate Lando Norris finishing ninth when he was with McLaren, obviously not his teammate any longer. But I do like the speed that the Ferrari's kind of been on. That's been reported that, or they've blatantly said that they've kind of focused their efforts into 2022 now with the new car coming. So that pace that we saw from Charles Leclerc, specifically on Saturdays for the poles for back-to-back weekends there in Baku and of course Monaco, I don't quite see that happening for the remainder of the season. For a lot of it, they could potentially get one surprise race here or there, but on the grand scheme of things, I think Ferrari's pace was a 2-week stint, and then we're going to see Mercedes and Red Bull kind of dominate from here on out. But I do think Carlos Sainz is still going to be a solid option this weekend. The pace has been decent for Ferrari. They've been kind of at the back half of the top 10 rather than in that middle pack of the top 10 this time around. So they're not going to be as strong this weekend probably at the Circuit Paul Ricard, but I think there is some value with Carlos Sainz, and I just couldn't quite get his teammate Charles Leclerc in with the budget that I have. I really, really would prefer Charles Leclerc in my lineup. So spoiler alert, he's not in my lineup, but I think that he would have been a better value pick and a better usage than Carlos Sainz. I just don't quite have the money. I'm very close. If I get one or two more good weeks and the price keeps bumping up, maybe I can make this lineup work long term. But Carlos Sainz, I'm kind of stuck with him as my Ferrari guy, which I'm okay with at the end of the day.
Yeah, I've got Carlos Sainz as well. And as you mentioned there, very consistent so far at Paul Ricard. Finished sixth after qualifying sixth last time we were here with McLaren. The time before that, finished finished eighth after qualifying seventh. So he's been strong at this circuit. Ferrari as well in the past has been strong at the circuit. They've had a podium finisher in both races at Paul Ricard and the second driver finishing fifth. So actually both races they've had third and fifth positions. I think Sainz is a shoo-in for a really solid result. I think maybe less so on the qualifying side and maybe picking up a couple positions on race day, which I'm kind of hoping for fantasy reasons, because the lesser qualifying position actually sometimes helps you out in terms of the position gained on race day, especially when they're in the top 10 there. So Carlos Sainz, I can see him qualifying in kind of that 7th to 10th range and then grabbing a couple more positions on race day. So Ferrari's been strong recently. They won't be as strong as they were, but Charles Leclerc, I'm sure, will be a very strong top 5 contender depending on how things play out in the race. And I think Carlos Sainz will be just a little bit behind that as well.
Alrighty. For my third selection now, you've just gone with Sainz. My third highest guy, Lando Norris. He stays in my lineup once again here this weekend. Just incredible value for what he brings to the table. He's the only driver left this season that scored points in every single Grand Prix. So he's just been absolutely insane. And I know I did predict in the preseason that he would be like my surprise driver, like I guess the surprise driver of the year. And for me, he has been. He's been up showing Daniel Ricciardo, largely because Ricciardo hasn't quite got acclimated to that car yet. But Lando Norris's performances so far this season have been superb. So I have no reason to take him out, finishing, I believe I said 9th last time we were here. So not bad. I think he's probably going to be in that 6th to 9th range once again on Sunday, which at the end of the day is pretty solid for that McLaren right now. They haven't quite hit their stride per se yet, but they're still in that top 10 for sure. Every single race weekend on pace alone. Ricardo seems to be a little bit better this weekend. It's not as bad as what it has been, I'll say that. So potentially can get a Q3 appearance. I would love that for Daniel Ricciardo, just to see him get that confidence back up, because he is a very confidence-built driver. But for Lando Norris, he's just been super good so far this season. I have no reason to take him out.
That's exactly it. Last time we were here, it was Lando Norris as a rookie as well. Don't forget that. Qualified 5th. Only finished 9th, but very solid qualifying effort. The McLaren doesn't seem to be kind of the pace as the Ferrari or even maybe the Alpine this weekend, which leans towards maybe a lesser qualifying effort and gaining positions again on race day, kind of seeing a theme here. Lando Norris, I feel like, will be able to take advantage of that on race day. So again, doesn't make sense to take him out of the lineup. He's so cheap. And again, as you said, is the only driver to have finished in the points every race so far this season. Consistent. And I don't expect that to change this weekend at Paul Ricard. So Lando Norris, absolutely in the lineup again.
Very good there. I believe, what do I have left here? Do you have one more that you haven't changed?
I've got one more driver to talk about.
Okay. I have 2. So mine, I'll leave my change for my last driver that I'll mention. Okay. But I'm going to stay with Pierre Gasly for me this weekend. Frenchman, home Grand Prix, seems pretty solid on the timing sheet so far this weekend as well. So I feel solid about him. In FP2, he was P7, so that's not bad
and
whatsoever.
P8 and FP1 as well, so very consistent.
Yeah, that's exactly where I hope Pierre Gasly ends up finishing really on Sunday. That's optimal result for me. If he can get a P6, that would be extraordinary, but I won't push my luck too far. Finishing 10th last time we were here in 2019. I think a top 10 result is
as well.
Yeah, that's true. Oh my God. I just looking at the results. That's weird to see. That feels like such a long time ago. But for Pierre Gasly, I think, all the cards are there for him to have a successful home Grand Prix weekend here. And he's been slowly getting that momentum back up a little bit, of course, with the podium last time out in Azerbaijan. So I could definitely see him, starting to get the momentum, clicking off some results here. Some tracks that earlier on in the season didn't quite suit their car. We're starting to get into that European stint here where the car is more suited to its liking. So I think Pierre Gasly is a pretty decent shout here. Yuki Tsunoda hasn't looked too bad so far this weekend either. So I'll give it to Pierre Gasly here to kind of round out the players that I have not changed since the last time we did this.
Yeah, and just getting to my last one here, I don't have Pierre Gasly this week. I am making the change to Esteban Ocon, partially because I feel like this is a good weekend for Ocon to gain back some of that budget and help out the budget increase a little bit. Gasly's still a little on the expensive side for my taste, even though I do think he's a very solid play this weekend. Again, consistent in that kind of 7th to 10th range. I feel like that's probably where he lands this weekend for Pierre Gasly. Ocon, the Alpines look very strong at their home Grand Prix. It's Ocon's home Grand Prix. So just looking at the two, he qualified 11th in 2019, or I believe it was 2018, sorry, because he did not start in 2019. That was the season he missed. In 2011, qualified 11th. Geez, there we go. And then DNF'd in that race. So hasn't been great for Esteban Ocon at his home track so far, but gets the opportunity to go back at it this weekend, and the Alpines look very quick. So Esteban Ocon, I feel like, could have some decent potential this weekend. The one thing that does concern me is if the Alpine has a qualifying pace, qualifies well in kind of like 6th, 7th, or even maybe higher, and then fall down the order a couple on race day, and kind of even though it's a solid day for Alpine in general, not a great day in terms of fantasy. We'll see how things go in that regard. But Esteban Ocon, I feel like, is a solid shout at just 10.4 million on the budget.
I as well have Esteban Ocon entering my lineup. He's swapping in for Sergio Perez, so a big budget fall off from what Perez's numbers are. I just like Ocon's pace quite a bit this week, and it seems like he's pretty comfortable here. Contract extension, so he's got a lot of confidence, a lot of momentum for himself. After having a DNF last time out, it's very difficult for me to see him having something that poor happen to him 2 races in a row, so I like that aspect of it as well. Esteban Ocon has all the makings here for me to use him for the first time this season as well. Haven't really dipped into the Alpine pool yet of drivers or constructor, but I feel decent about him this weekend. And for his value, when I look at his teammate Fernando Alonso, who's going to be in similar pace, it seems, based off of practice, I'd much rather have the options that Esteban Ocon gives me for maybe even a slighter difference in points total than what Fernando Alonso can bring to the table. And I'm limited in terms of my other kind of moves that I wanted to make. So Esteban Ocon was a no-brainer for me to finish out my driver lineups this week. And as we were recording this, I got to be honest, I was tinkering around with some stuff, and I almost made a different move, which really? I'm kind of regretting that I kind of wish I did do. But, you know, we're recording this live, so I can't make any more changes.
What were you thinking
about? It has to do with my constructor, so I'll reveal it after.
Huh. That's interesting, because I felt like I knew where you're going with constructor. But the constructor kind of changed my 2 drivers that I wanted. I'll say that it was like a 3-way kind of combo that maybe that I could have switched. But I'll kick things off for constructor because I don't know yours yet. I'm switching from McLaren. I kind of tried to play the strategy at Baku, hoping for some lesser qualifying and then good race day, and that actually worked out pretty well for me. McLaren had a pretty solid fantasy points day,
better than Ferrari.
Yes, but I am making the switch back to Ferrari for this one. I feel pretty solid about them this weekend. I like Sainz. I really like Leclerc after finishing on the podium in 2019. I like the momentum that they kind of got going at that team. The thing that does scare me a little bit is if they qualify too well and kind of just maintain that position versus maybe starting a little bit lower and then getting up to that position on race day. We'll see how things go and kind of how the battle with Alpine and McLaren go, and maybe mix in a little Aston Martin as well, depending on where they're at, even though they look a little bit off the pace this weekend. But for Ferrari, I feel like there's the potential for them to be out-qualified by Alpine and then grab those positions on race day, which would really help for the fantasy points there. So that's the main reason why I'm making the switch back to Ferrari. I just believe in their pace more than McLaren at this track.
Fair enough. So my budget, so the way I've tinkered around with it, it's something that I haven't done for a while. It's going back to the first round of the season. I'm putting Red Bull in as my constructor.
That's scary.
So in terms of changing Sergio Perez out, I felt good about the overall constructor.
Yep.
So I went with Red Bull. But I was looking at it and I was like, man, I could have done something really sneaky, and I could have gone with Alpine as my constructor. And then I could have gone with Charles Leclerc and Sergio Perez instead of Esteban Ocon and Carlos Sainz. And that's kind of what I wish I could have done, to be honest, just to really spice things up. Okay. But I'm going to stick with this. Going back to Red Bull. I believe
in Red Bull as the constructor more, for what it's worth.
I do as well, but just when I look at what the results we've had so far this season, the driver numbers or the driver totals that they get for the race weekend are much better than having the constructor. But for this weekend, it feels a little bit up in the air in terms of results. I don't quite like the Ferrari as much as you do this weekend, and I have to wait until Daniel Ricciardo finds his groove with the McLaren, and then I'll probably put them as my long-term constructor. But for this weekend, Ocon's pace combined with Red Bull kind of looking as a top 2 contender for sure this weekend. Verstappen, potentially a race winner. Perez, hopefully a top 5 finish at the very least for him this weekend. But that was kind of my thought process here, and I had the budget to make it work. I have actually 1.8 million still free.
Wow.
That I could still kind of. I don't really like having that much cap room, but
that's a lot.
I feel like the Toronto Maple Leafs right now with their cap kind of their shenanigans, or even the Tampa Bay Lightning maybe.
I was going to say that the Tampa Bay Lightning is the much fairer comparison. But.
Fair enough, but I had to give a little bit of the Leafs egg, wearing the hat and all. But nonetheless, I do like the decision to go with Red Bull for this weekend. Beyond this, I don't know. They're really good at Austria, so maybe I'll stick with them for the next 3 weekends. We'll see what the results happen this weekend, but I'm looking forward to this one. I just wanted to spice things up. I've gone a little bit too plain for the last couple of weeks, and why not? Let's try it here for Red Bull at for the French Grand Prix.
Well, you might have the Tampa Bay Lightning cap strategy there, but I feel bad when you get the Vancouver Canucks result, so I apologize before it happens.
That'll do it for today's episode, everybody. Appreciate you coming on.
I'm sorry. It was too easy. Alrighty, let's get these race picks out of the way.
Let's get it done. Pole pick Saturday. What are you thinking here? Who's going to be starting first? You got your 3 basic contenders here. I don't think the Ferrari is going to quite get the pole this time around, but
hey, you never know.
What do you got? Maybe a safety car or something. Or no, a yellow flag, red flag.
Well, this time around, there isn't really any walls for either Ferrari to crash into to save their pole time, so we don't got that this time. You know what? Screw it. I'm going to go bold with it. He's good over 1 lap. The race pace hasn't been there this season. I'll say Valtteri Bottas snakes the pole for Max Verstappen.
Okay. I'm going to go with Lewis Hamilton to get the pole this weekend.
Okay.
That is his 101st pole position as well. So I think it'd be cool for him to get that done on Saturday. Podium. Let's go from 3rd to 1st. You have Bottas on pole. Does he end up finishing inside the top 2 here?
Bottas on pole, but because of strategy and everything like that, the preference will still go to Hamilton. So Valtteri Bottas finishes 3rd on my podium.
I have him 3rd as well. So I'm guessing we have a very similar looking podium here. But yeah, for me, Bottas makes sense for his 3rd. 2nd.
Do you want to go winner or 2nd?
Okay, I'll go winner. Why not?
Okay.
For me, I'm going to say Hamilton converts pole to victory here this weekend. He had 2 tough weekends, and it's really, really tough to keep Lewis Hamilton down for 3. So I'd say that he's, for me, the favorite coming into this weekend. He has to try and right the ship a little bit, get the championship lead back. If he does win and Verstappen finishes 2nd, because spoiler alert, I have Max Verstappen finishing 2nd. After 2 crazy weekends here with Monaco and Azerbaijan having 2 obscure podiums, I think we go back to the most common podium in F1 history with Bottas, Verstappen, and Hamilton. It's just a track that kind of suits that kind of style where it's pretty cut and dry. I'm not expecting anything too crazy. We asked for Baku chaos in the last episode for this. We got it delivered. We got it. So I feel good about that. I was expecting chaos, and it definitely delivered. But this time I think we have more of a sane, normal, bland Grand Prix, and you have your usual suspects with Hamilton ending up victorious here.
Yeah, I'll agree for the kind of chalky, kind of basic podium here, but I am going to spice it up a little bit. I'm going to say Max Verstappen gets the win over Lewis Hamilton. He's just got the confidence right now. And even if he doesn't have the faster car, which is still up for discussion going into this weekend, I'm going to say that just the form he's been in, kind of the turmoil is too strong of a word, but lack of confidence kind of that Mercedes has had. They've kind of not been the same kind of well-oiled machine, just do everything right and dominate the last few weeks. I'll say a little bit of that trickles over. Lewis Hamilton loses out, finishes P2 to Max Verstappen, who is atop the top step of the podium once again here, as the championship battle kind of spices up yet again.
Best of the rest. I forgot to do this one. What do you got?
Okay. This best of the rest is the best one, so we might as well do it last year.
Who's outside the top 2? Who should really be winning this race, essentially, if they were given an equal?
Well, what I'll say is that I do think that it'll be a very chalk top 4. I'll say Sergio Perez finishes 4th behind that. And so finishing 5th and best of the rest for me will be Charles Leclerc. Back last time we were here, he was on the podium for Ferrari. They're a little bit of a step back. Don't know if you've heard about that before. But I do think Ferrari is going to be solid enough. Even if they aren't the top qualifying best of the rest, I do think that they will be best of the rest come race day. So Charles Leclerc finishes 5th and best of the rest for myself.
I have him as well. I think Alpine's pace is a little bit scary in terms of predicting them to execute that on race day. But they could definitely get up there and spoil the party for sure. If something happens in that midfield, Ferrari mess up a strategy, which I don't know if you've heard, but they are prone to do. So I think that there's a potential with that, but Charles Leclerc has had the results here. Semi-home Grand Prix for the Monegasque, really close in terms of the neighboring country, obviously. So I think he's got all the tools here this weekend just to be a consistent drive, get a top 5 finish, and just get as many points as you can at the end of the day. He's just been really consistent so far this season, and hopefully he can execute that and get a top 5 finish, which, you know, he's had some trouble getting that. Obviously, he didn't get to start in Monaco. Azerbaijan didn't quite go his way. He just got bypassed earlier on after the pole, and then he didn't quite get the podium that he, you know, maybe was expected per se. If all the chaos was going to happen, you would have thought Leclerc would have at least been on pole given his starting spot, but that didn't come to fruition for him either. So I think he just needs a calming weekend here for Leclerc, gets a top 5, and I'll say that he gets it done on Sunday. So that does it for the French Grand Prix preview. I don't know what to expect from this race. Hopefully there's some shenanigans going into the first corner and there's a safety car maybe or something like that. But, you know, it is the French Grand Prix. We can't spice it up too much because at the end of the day, we are realistic with our expectations. But any final thoughts before we wrap up?
What I'll say is I think the strategy and the storylines is going to be more exciting this weekend than the actual on-track product here. I doubt we're going to see that much in terms of head-to-head battle at the front or anything like that. I feel like once it gets situated, that'll kind of be how it is. But when it comes to pit strategy, that kind of stuff, I feel like that's where it's going to get more interesting, kind of like what we saw at Catalonia, where that track isn't very exciting. But because the strategy place we got in it, it spiced it up quite a bit. I feel like that's probably the kind of race that we'll get on Sunday versus a kind of chaotic race or kind of a bit of a jousting match between the top 2 or 3. So I think that's what you got to go into it realistic. And if it exceeds expectations, then happily do so, but don't go in expecting an Azerbaijan or anything like that. I feel like this is going to be a fairly straightforward race, but then again, it kind of looked like Azerbaijan was going to be a straightforward race until the end of things. So you never know with Formula One, but Paul Ricard hasn't been great in the past, and I really don't see why that would change this weekend.
Fair enough. I'm in complete agreement. I think we have pretty similar expectations coming into this one.
Here's the big question and kind of the overall one that tells you how it's going to go. Will you wake up for the French Grand Prix?
No.
Exactly.
No.
You're on the West Coast, so I'll wake up for it, but
I'm not getting up for 6 a.m.
I'll wake up for it and probably fall back asleep.
Yeah, I have too much on my plate right now.
I knew the answer.
To try and even think about getting up for this race.
When we get to Austria, I feel like that's a much more interesting question, but right now, not a chance.
Is Austria the same time though?
Yeah, it's going to be a 9 a.m. start out here at least.
I just one more hour later, I can make it work for 7, but 6 is just pushing it too hard.
The British Grand Prix is at 10 a.m. my time, so that one will be good for you.
I'll get up for that. After last year's shenanigans there at Silverstone, but I think that'll do it for the French Grand Prix preview. Sorry if it wasn't the most exciting episode in the world, but the fantasy
there's only so much we can do.
The fantasy stuff should hopefully add some excitement on our end, just to see how our kind of a lineup of switches have kind of, or they kind of shake out. But make sure to follow us on Instagram at The Green Flag Pod, as well as Twitter at The Green Flag Pod. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. We would really, really appreciate it. The support on the channel has been tremendous recently, so thank you all so much for that. Really looking forward to just recapping kind of this whole race weekend. If I have the time, who knows? Maybe I won't. I don't know. Honest to God, I probably won't. But it's just going to be a busy weekend. So if there's no race recap, don't be disappointed. I'm trying my best here. But for this episode, I'm Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman signing off for now. Try your best to enjoy the French Grand Prix, and we will talk to you when we talk to you. Enjoy the race, everybody.